Welcome to Savi YouTube channel of Sai Vidya Institute of Technology, Bangalore. I am Dr. G Manjunath, Professor and HOD, Department of EEE. In the last session, we found Z and Y parameters, that is impedance and admittance parameters, and also we defined those parameters. So, in this session, let us discuss two more parameters, that is H parameters and T parameters in the topic two-port networks. Now, H parameters, also known as hybrid parameters, they are very useful in modeling transistor circuits. Now, we should know the defining equations of these parameters, which I explained in the first session of this model. So, what are the defining equations? The defining equations of H parameters are, one is voltage equation, other is current equation. That is, dependent variables of H parameters are V1 and I2. V1 is equal to H11 I1 plus H12 V2. I2 is equal to H21 I1 plus H22 V2. So, this is what the defining equation of H parameters. Here, similar to previous session, whatever the conditions we applied to find Z and Y parameters, here also we are going to apply the conditions for finding the parameters. Suppose if you want to find these two parameters, we are going to make the second term 0, means here the variable present here is voltage V2. We have to make V2 0. How to make V2 0? V2 is nothing but voltage available at the output port. V2 is nothing but voltage available at the output port of two-port network. So, how to make voltage 0? You have to create the short circuit. If you create the short circuit, so V2 becomes 0. Once V2 becomes 0, I can find these two parameters. H11 becomes V1 by I1, H21 is equal to I2 by I1. Similarly, if you want to find these two parameters, I have to make the first term 0. So, in the first term, the current variable is present, that is I1. So, I have to make I1 0. What is I1? I1 is nothing but current at the input port. How to make current I1 0? You have to create open circuit, because under open circuit, current is 0. Hence, by creating open circuit at the input port, I can make I1 0. By making I1 0, I can find these two parameters. That is, H12 is equal to V1 by V2, H22 is equal to I2 by V2. Now, let us do that one. Okay. So, to find, that means to find H parameters, we are making use of both short circuit and open circuit conditions. Okay. In Z parameters, we are making use of only open circuit conditions. In Y parameters, we are making use of short circuit conditions. In H parameters, we are making use of both the short circuit as well as open circuit conditions. To find H11 and H21, now what you should do? We have to make V2 0. V2 means what? That is short circuit the output port, short circuit the output port. Then what happens? Equation 1 becomes V1 is equal to H11 I1 gives H11 is equal to what? V1 by I1 at V2 equal to 0. Equation 2 becomes what? I2 is equal to H21 I1. Okay. So, you are making V2 0 now. So, I2 equal to H21 I1 gives H21 is equal to I2 by I1 with V2 equal to 0. Okay. Next, to find to find H12 and H22, H12 and H22, make what? If you want to find these two, make I1 0, I1 equal to 0. I1 0 is nothing but what? That is open circuit the input port. Then what happens? Then we get equation 1 becomes V1 is equal to H12 V2. Therefore, H12 is equal to V1 by V2 with I1 equal to 0. So, equation 2 gives I2 is equal to H22 V2. H22 V2. Therefore, H22 is equal to what? I2 by V2 at I1 equal to 0. Now, you got all the ratios. Now, looking to this ratio, we have to define what is H11, what is H21, H12 and H22. Now, let us define one by one. To define any parameter, first you should see the ratio. Observe here. What is this ratio? Ratio is V by I. V by I means impedance. V by means impedance. What impedance? It is input impedance because the ratio is input voltage by input current. Hence, H11 represents input impedance with output port short circuited because voltage is 0, short circuited. Next, coming to H22, this ratio is I by V, that is inverse of this. I by V means what? Admittance. Okay. And the ratio is output current by output voltage gives output admittance with input port open circuited. Why? Because current is 0, input current. So, H22 represents what? Output admittance with the input port open circuited. Then remaining two, let us see. H21, the ratio is both I by I and this is V by V, means it is not V by I or I by V. Hence, it is not impedance or it is not admittance. This is current ratio, this is voltage ratio. We know the gain is the ratio of output by input. If the ratio is current, it is current gain. If the ratio is voltage, it is voltage gain. So, this is what? Output current by input current means it is current gain, okay, with output port short circuited. What is H12? It is not the ratio of output voltage by input voltage, but it is input voltage by output voltage. That means the ratio is reverse of that gain. Gain means output by input, but it is input by output. Now, hence I can call this as reverse voltage gain with input port open circuited because I1 is 0. Okay. Since we are using specifically word here reverse voltage gain, I can use here the forward current gain. Instead of just calling for current gain, I can use here forward current gain. Now repeat, what is this? Input impedance with output port short circuited, H21, forward current gain with output port short circuited. Then this is reverse voltage gain with input port open circuited. This is output admittance I by V, admittance with input port open circuited. This is how to define all these parameters. After defining these parameters, then what I should do? Let us write the equivalent circuit of H parameters. Okay. Now, to write the equivalent circuit, you have to look to the defining equations. So, voltage equation, this voltage equal to this voltage plus this voltage means voltage is dividing in a series circuit, hence I should write a loop at the input port. And another equation, current equation, this current is dividing into two currents, current divides in a parallel circuit, hence I2 is coming at the output port. At the output we will get a parallel circuit, at the input we will get a series circuit. So let us write the equivalent circuit. This is a common ground. So you know the variables at the input port and at the output port. V1 is the voltage here, current is I1 here, output voltage is V2, output current is I2. Direction must be like this. First is V1 is equal to, first term is H11 I1. This is the voltage drop. I1 is coming here. If it passes through H11, then you will get a voltage drop here, H11 I1. Second term, H12 V2. Since V2 is existing at the output port, hence this voltage drop I should represent by a dependent voltage source. That is H12 V2. So this is dependent source symbol. It's a polarity represents voltage source depending on voltage V2. Hence it is a voltage dependent voltage source. V2 is nothing but output voltage. Next, coming to the second equation, current is dividing in a parallel circuit and this I2 is divided into two currents. Hence I should write here the parallel circuit. So this one H22 V2, hence V2 is here. If I just write here H22 here, voltage across this is V2, gives this current, that is H22 V2. Then next current H21 I1. So let us write here a dependent current source now, because I1 is here now. Current is dividing here. This is H21 I1. That's all. So this is a current source depending on current. Hence it is a current dependent current source. So I1 is dependent variable, which is nothing but input current I1. That is how to write the equivalent circuit. Very simple for this H parameters. Now the last one, let us find the T parameters. That is nothing but the transmission parameters or ABCD parameters. Now let us go for the next parameters to find, that is transmission parameters or T parameters, also known as ABCD parameters. Now let us write the defining equations. The defining equations of ABCD parameters are very, very important. Here dependent variables are V1 and I1 depending on V2 and I2. So A V2 minus B I2, I1 is equal to C V2 minus D I2, means very important is negative sign. This is how it is defined. V1 is equal to A V2 minus B I2, I1 equal to C V2 minus D I2. Let this equation 1, equation 2. Again same procedure we will follow. To find A and C, make I2 0. I2 is nothing but current coming at the output port. How to make I2 0? Create open circuit. So creating open circuit, we can find A and C. Again to find B and D, make V2 0. V2 is nothing but voltage at the output port. How to make V2 voltage 0? Create the short circuit. So creating a short circuit, V2 becomes 0, so that we can find B and D. That is what we should follow to find this path. To find A and C, make I2 equal to 0. That is open circuit the output port. Then what happens? Equation 1 becomes V1 is equal to A V2, that gives A is equal to what? V1 by V2 at I2 equal to 0. Second equation becomes I1 is equal to CV2 gives what? C is equal to I1 by V2 at I2 equal to 0. Next, we got these two ratios. Now I have to find B and D. To find B and D, we have to make V2 0. V2 0 means what? We have to create the short circuit at the output port. So to find B and D, make V2 equal to 0. That is, short circuit the output port. Short circuit the output port. And what happens? Equation 1 becomes V1 is equal to minus BI2. Therefore, what is B? Minus V1 by I2 at V2 equal to 0. Okay. Next, equation 2 gives what? I1 is equal to, so I1 is equal to, this is 0, minus di2, minus di2. Therefore, what is D? Minus I1 by I2. I1 by I2 at V2 equal to 0. So, we got all the ratios. Once you get all the ratios, now let us define what is A represents B, C and D. To know what is the meaning of A or B and anything, you should see the ratio. A is the ratio of input voltage by output voltage. Anyhow, the ratio is voltage ratio. Okay. So, voltage ratio, but this is input voltage by output voltage. Gain is the ratio of output voltage by input voltage. Since it is reverse ratio, hence it is reverse voltage gain with output port open circuited, because current is 0, output current is 0 now. So, A is nothing but what? Reverse voltage gain with output port open circuited. C is what? Ratio is I by V. I by V gives what? Admittance. What admittance? It is input current by output voltage. If the ratio is input by output or output by input, then we use the word transfer. So, transfer admittance, I by V is admittance. Since ratio is output by input by output, hence it is transfer admittance with output port open circuited. Coming to B here, ratio is V by I, very clear. Impedance, what impedance? Input voltage by output current, hence it is transfer impedance with output port short circuited. Port means terminals. So, we are going to create the short circuit to find this parameter, that is the meaning of that, with output port short circuited. What is D? The ratio is current, but the ratio is input current by output current, you know, that is reverse current gain, because gain means it should be output by input, but it is reverse of that. Hence, it is reverse current gain with output port short circuited. Okay. Let us write one by one. Tell me what is A? What is A? It is reverse voltage gain. Reverse voltage gain with output port what? Open circuited. Open circuited. Okay. What is a C? C is what? I by V. Admittance. What admittance? Transfer. So, transfer admittance. Transfer admittance. Okay. With output port open circuited. What is B? B is what? V by I, impedance. But this ratio is input by output. Hence, it is again transfer impedance. Transfer impedance with output port short circuited. With output port short circuited. Last one, D. What is D? Reverse current gain. Reverse reverse current gain, okay, with what? Output port short circuited, ditto. So that is how to define all the parameters. If the question is asked, define T parameters or ABCD parameters, we have to explain this much. So in this session, we have defined H and T parameters. I hope all of you have followed. Thank you.